Callum Smith wins his quarterfinal in the World Boxing Super Series at super middleweight with a 12-round unanimous decision over Erik Skoglund. The fight turned out to be tougher for Callum Smith than I think most people would have expected. And it's a situation where a lot of us who are British or even American who are following this tournament were probably ignorant about Skoglund. We've never seen him fight before. He's from some Scandinavian country, and those countries don't normally produce a lot of top boxers. So I guess there was a certain snobbishness about us, and we dismissed the guy just on reflex action. Well, he's from one of them countries where they don't normally have good boxers, so obviously Smith is going to beat him easily. Was Smith also as dismissive of Skoglund as some of us were? Is that the reason that the fight was as tough as it was? Well, maybe he expected the fight to be that tough. Smith started off well, but in the middle round, Skoglund started landing a lot of shots on Smith. He got his jab going. He started busting Smith's face up. And it was actually looking at one stage as though Smith was fading and he was headed for a defeat. But he managed to pull it back in the later rounds, scored a good knockdown, I believe it was in the 11th, and came through the fight and got himself a unanimous decision. I feel like the scorecards were way too wide, and it was actually a bit of a strange one tonight, because on the Box Nation show, on the BT Sport Box Nation show with Billy Joe Saunders, he was the home fighter, and I feel like the scores were too close in the Billy Joe Saunders fight against Willie Monroe. One of the judges only had Billy Joe winning by a round, which God knows what he was watching. But in this Callum Smith Skoglund fight, I feel like the scores were way too wide, and it was a lot closer than the judges had it. Skoglund, he fought bravely. First time I've ever seen him fight. He's a big, tall guy just like Smith. Smith is like 6'4", I think, for a super middleweight, very tall. Skoglund, I believe, normally fights at light heavyweight, so he was coming down in weight for this fight. Potentially might have been a bit weakened, but who knows? It was just weird seeing two guys this big and rangy and tall fighting each other at super middleweight. It was almost like watching a cruiserweight fight. It just looked odd. But yeah, Smith pulled it out of the bag in the end. A tough, tough victory. In the next round, I believe he'll be facing the winner of Jürgen Bremer against, who's the other guy, man? I can't remember the guy's name. He's the American guy who, his name escapes me, but he'll be fighting the winner of that fight, I believe. Callum Smith definitely seems to have the easier side of the draw. He picked Skoglund, obviously, and then to fight the Bremer against the other guy winner. That seems to be an easier road than the other side, where you've got Chris Eubank Jr. and George Groves, who Eubank Jr.'s got, I think, a tough assignment ahead of him against Yildirim. Then Groves is fighting Cox. Cox is a very spirited fighter. Then Groves and Eubank Jr. are going to fight each other in the semi-final. A lot of people think it's kind of a shame that they're not fighting each other in the final, because that kind of matchup is really worthy of a final. That's definitely a tougher side of the draw than Smith's side of the draw. So can we expect to see Smith in the final? I think I'd probably bet on it that he would be in the final. I think so. Whereas Groves and Eubank, really hard to say, because they're going to have a very tough matchup against each other. Next weekend, I believe, is... God, what is it next weekend? Is it Eubank next weekend? And the weekend after that, I think, is George Groves against Jamie Cox. I believe that's how it goes. Maybe I'm totally off here. In fact, let me look it up right now. On the fly, people. Let's do it. Should have prepared this earlier. Chris Eubank Jr. Let's see when his fight is. Okay. Yildirim. All right, no, that's October the 7th. So that's quite a way off yet. Is the George Groves fight before then or after then? Look at me again on the fly. Where's George Groves at? George Groves, where we at? And the George Groves fight is after the Eubank fight. So I guess the next couple weekends are going to be the cruiserweights. They're not going to be the super middleweights unless there's going to be the Jürgen Bremer fight against that American guy. The cruiserweights, I think the Kudryashov-Dorticus fight is going to be on ITV either this weekend or the next weekend after that. That's going to be a good fight. That's not going to be pay-per-view, thankfully, because a lot of the super middleweight fights are pay-per-view, whereas the cruiserweight fights, most of them I think are going to be free to air. So that's good news for people watching wherever they're watching. Anyway, let me know how you feel about Callum Smith's performance. Has the toughness of this fight against Skoglund changed your perception of him? You know, some people were talking in my Facebook group about how they think Eubank Jr. would fare against Callum Smith. And I have to be honest, I'm starting more and more now to think that Eubank Jr. will beat Callum Smith. The one thing which just struck me watching Callum Smith against Skoglund is how slow Callum Smith is compared to Eubank Jr. Obviously, he's a lot bigger, but he's a slow guy and he's a very, very big target. Eubank Jr. regularly spars big, tall guys, so it won't be strange to him going in there having to punch up and dealing with someone who's big and physically strong. And I just think there's a massive speed gap between the two of them. And I think Eubank Jr. has an underrated defense. I know he can be a bit reckless at times, but when he decides he's going to be slick and slippery, I can see him moving his head and slipping underneath Callum Smith's shots, hitting him to the body. He's just a big, big target for Eubank Jr. Honestly, I would favor Eubank Jr. in that fight. Eubank Jr. has got, personally, I think, a tough assignment against Yildirim. I haven't seen that much of Yildirim, but just stylistically, he comes forward, he's relentless, he's very aggressive, he's good at cutting off the ring, I've seen him. So, I don't know, just stylistically, and this might sound strange, I'm not saying that Yildirim is a better fighter than Callum Smith, but stylistically, I'm more concerned for Eubank against Yildirim than I would be against Callum Smith. Because he's a shorter guy who tucks up very tight, he's a smaller target, you know, whereas Callum Smith is just a big, big target for Eubank Jr.'s speed and his uppercuts and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. The Groves-Eubank fight is intriguing to me. I slightly favor Eubank, but not by much. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Groves beats him. The reason why I'm slightly leaning towards Eubank is the fact that Groves to me looks a bit jaded. And I've been saying this for a while, and I know it upsets a lot of Groves fans, but that's just what I see. You know, if I'm wrong, then Groves will prove me wrong, but I just don't see the same explosiveness in Groves' punches. I don't see the same energy levels that he used to have. Everything seems forced from Groves these days. That's just how it looks to me. You know, I'm not trying to be on a downer about Groves or anything like that, because that's what I get accused of all the time. It's not that. I'm just telling you what I see. You know, like Catchphrase, the game show from back in the days with Roy Walker, the Irish guy. Just say what you see. That's what he used to say when they were looking at the Catchphrase. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just saying what I see with Groves. To me, I see a guy who looks a bit jaded and his work is forced. And because of that, I'm slightly favoring Eubank Jr. over him, because Eubank Jr. is full of life. He's full of beans, man. He's got the eye of the tiger. He's got the energy levels. He's got all that kind of stuff. Groves, I think, hits a lot harder than Eubank Jr. He's more experienced. He's been through a lot more different type of situations, but Eubank Jr. knows Groves. They've sparred countless rounds together, so it won't be a shock to Eubank when he gets in the ring with Groves. You know? That's one thing I think people are underestimating. I know people say sparring is sparring, but when you have a familiarity of sparring somebody a hell of a lot fairly recently, it's not the same as getting in with somebody who you've never sparred before. Like, for example, WBO heavyweight world champion Joseph Parker, in his last performance, he fought Kajanu, right? I think it was called Razvan Kajanu. That guy had sparred a lot of rounds with Joseph Parker. And I think that's one of the reasons why Parker had such an awkward night with him. Because the guy knew him well. He knew what Parker was like. He knew what his power was like. He knew the moves that Parker made. He knew what he would be able to do against Parker successfully. Familiarity breeds contempt, and it takes away that element of fear, because you know the guy, you've been in the ring with him. So anyway, maybe I'll do a separate video about, well, I will do a separate video about George Groves versus Chris Eubank Jr. if they both win their quarterfinals and give us the big UK showdown. That fight will be marketed all over the damn place. That will be a very, very big fight in the UK. Eubank Jr. versus George Groves. That will be a big, big fight on ITV. Let me know how you feel about everything I've talked about in this video, people. It's happening. I'm out.